For the next 100 days, imagine stepping into a journey designed not to change your life overnight, but to reshape the core of who you are slowly, steadily, and intentionally. This path is not powered by luck or talent. It is built on something far more reliable. Discipline. The kind of discipline that does not shout, does not show off, but quietly transforms you through small, deliberate actions repeated every single day. In a world that celebrates shortcuts and quick wins, choosing consistency becomes a radical act of strength. Most people wait for motivation to strike. They wait for the right moment. But the truth is simple. Moments do not change you, habits do. And this journey is about proving that a stronger, calmer, more resilient version of yourself is already within reach, hidden behind the excuses you have outgrown. Over the next few minutes, you will discover how powerful a single disciplined choice can be. How waking up with intention, even on difficult days, gradually fortifies your mind. How resisting the pull of old patterns slowly rewires your identity. And how, step by step, you can build an inner strength that does not crumble under pressure. If you are ready to begin this transformation, if you want to cultivate a spirit that can stand firm through uncertainty and challenge, then stay with us. This is your invitation to rise above the noise and commit to a journey that truly matters. And before we dive deeper, if this message resonates with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and allows us to keep creating meaningful content for you. Let us build that unbreakable spirit together. From the very first day of the journey, something becomes clear. The path toward an unbreakable spirit is not lined with comfort. It is filled with moments that test resolve, stretch patience, and expose the quiet fears that usually stay hidden beneath routine. Yet instead of treating hardship as a barrier, this journey invites you to look at it differently, as a tool shaped specifically to strengthen the parts of you that once felt fragile. When difficulties arise, they do not appear as enemies or interruptions. They arrive as unexpected teachers, whispering reminders that growth often hides inside the very experiences we try to avoid. Imagine waking up on a morning when your motivation has completely vanished, when every task feels heavier than it should and a quiet voice inside insists that you deserve a break. In the past, you might have listened, stepped back, and convinced yourself that rest was the safer choice. But in this journey, that same moment becomes a mirror, revealing how discipline is not built on easy days, but forged in the small decisions you make when everything feels inconvenient. Each hesitation becomes a chance to practice self-control. Each discomfort becomes training for a stronger mind. The challenge does not ask you to be fearless. It simply asks you to keep moving. Hardship, when reframed, becomes the sharpening stone for resilience. You begin to notice how your reactions slowly shift. What once triggered frustration now becomes a signal to breathe deeper and push forward with calm intention. What once felt like failure now becomes data information about where you are growing and where you are still learning. Even setbacks change meaning. Missing a step is not proof of weakness, but proof that you care enough to try again. Over time, you start to see patterns. Resilience does not arrive in a single moment of bravery. It appears gradually in the quiet decision to continue, even when doubt threatens to pull you backward. As the days pass, you become more attuned to the subtle transformation happening beneath the surface. Hardship no longer shakes you the way it used to. Instead of breaking your rhythm, it becomes part of it. Instead of draining your energy, it refocuses it. And instead of making you question your strength, it reveals it. You realize that self-control is not about suppressing emotion but guiding it. Not about forcing yourself to be rigid but choosing alignment over impulse. Every challenge becomes a reminder that discipline is not punishment, it is liberation. It frees you from old habits, from emotional turbulence, from the cycles that once controlled your life without your awareness. There is a moment, somewhere around the middle of the journey, when you recognize how far you have come without even noticing. A stressful day that would have overwhelmed you before now barely shakes your balance. A disappointment that once felt like a wall now appears as a temporary turn. Hardship still exists, but its weight has changed. Instead of shrinking under it, you stand taller because of it, carrying its lessons like armor rather than chains. By embracing challenges as stepping stones rather than threats, you begin to understand the deeper purpose of this 100-day transformation. Strength is not something granted by perfect circumstances. It is something uncovered through persistence, shaped by adversity, and refined every time you choose discipline over distraction. And as this understanding roots itself deeply within you, hardship loses its ability to intimidate. It becomes the sculptor of your resilience, the quiet force that molds you into someone steadier, clearer, and more grounded than ever before. As the journey unfolds, a quieter truth begins to reveal itself, one that sits beneath the intensity of discipline and the weight of challenges. It is the realization that transformation rarely arrives through grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs. Instead, it forms slowly through the small, almost invisible rhythms you repeat each day. At first, these habits feel like simple tasks: waking up a little earlier, completing a few minutes of intentional reflection, choosing restraint when emotions push you toward impulse. But as the days accumulate, they begin to shape something deeper than routine. They start to mold identity. The person you were at the beginning of the journey slowly gives way to someone more deliberate, more aware, and more stable from the inside out. There is a moment, often unnoticed while it is happening, when these repeated behaviors begin to teach your mind a new language. You wake with intention not because the morning demands it, but because you have grown used to meeting the day with clarity. You practice patience in moments of frustration not because it is easy, but because it has become part of who you are becoming. The consistency of these small acts plants seeds that quietly reshape your emotional endurance. Where you once reacted quickly, you now pause. Where you once carried tension for hours, you now let it move through you without taking root. The change is subtle, but its impact is steady and powerful. Even the most ordinary habits begin to serve as anchors. A few minutes of calm breathing before the day begins steadies the mind more than you expect. A brief walk to clear your thoughts during stressful moments reminds you that movement creates clarity. A commitment to end the evening with reflection gently turns your attention inward, helping you recognize patterns you once overlooked. None of these habits make a loud announcement, yet, when practiced consistently, they reshape the way you process experience. They become the threads that quietly weave resilience into your identity. As the days continue, you start to feel a shift in how you relate to yourself. The small commitments you once struggled to maintain now feel like natural parts of your rhythm. You no longer question whether you can stay consistent, because consistency has become something you inhabit rather than chase. The discipline that felt heavy in the beginning now feels like a familiar presence guiding your choices, and the emotional weight you once carried with difficulty begins to lighten. Not because life becomes easier, but because your capacity has grown. Gradually, you realize that these habits are not just shaping what you do, they are shaping how you see yourself. Each act of discipline reinforces the belief that you are someone capable of follow-through. Each intentional moment strengthens the trust you have in your own decisions. Identity, once built on old patterns and doubts, begins to align with strength and clarity. You start to recognize yourself not as someone hoping to change, but as someone actively becoming the person you once imagined. By the time you reach this part of the journey, the transformation feels less like a sudden shift and more like a steady unfolding. Daily habits are no longer mere tasks to check off. They are expressions of the new self taking form. Through them, your mindset grows more resilient, your emotional endurance deepens, and your sense of identity becomes rooted in intention rather than circumstance. And in that quiet, persistent growth, You begin to understand the true power of repetition not as a burden, but as the foundation of lasting inner strength. As the rhythm of daily habits settles into place, another layer of the journey begins to surface, one that is quieter, more demanding, and far more revealing. It is the recognition that true growth cannot rely solely on discipline, or resilience, or the steady repetition of routine. It must also be supported by something more personal and often more uncomfortable: the willingness to hold yourself accountable. Without this, even the strongest habits eventually lose their meaning, because self-improvement cannot thrive in the shadows where excuses hide. Accountability requires a kind of honesty that is not always easy to face, especially when it exposes the parts of you that still resist change. Yet this honesty becomes the turning point where transformation deepens. It usually begins with small moments, the kind that are easy to overlook. Perhaps you catch yourself slipping back into an old pattern, skipping a commitment, or reacting in a way that no longer aligns with the person you are trying to become. In the past, you might have brushed these moments aside or blamed them on tiredness, stress, or circumstance. But as the journey progresses, something shifts. Instead of searching for reasons to justify the lapse, you pause long enough to acknowledge it, not with judgment, but with clarity. This simple act, choosing to see your own behavior without distortion, becomes a quiet declaration of responsibility. It is the first sign that you are no longer shaped by excuses but guided by intention. With time, this honesty grows stronger. When mistakes happen, as they inevitably do, you no longer see them as proof of failure. They become signals pointing toward the areas where you still have work to do. You begin to understand that mistakes are not evidence that you are incapable. They are reminders that growth is an ongoing process. Accepting them allows you to study your own patterns, to recognize the impulses or fears that still influence your actions, and to correct your course with clarity rather than frustration. Accountability becomes less about pointing out what went wrong and more about learning how to move forward with steadiness and maturity. This inner responsibility also reshapes the way you speak to yourself. Instead of using discouragement as motivation or letting frustration dictate your mindset, you cultivate a voice that is firm but fair, one that acknowledges effort while demanding honesty. You start to recognize the difference between compassion and indulgence. Compassion helps you rise after a setback. Indulgence keeps you repeating the same mistake under the guise of self-kindness. True accountability blends both strength and understanding, pushing you to grow without tearing yourself down. As the days progress, you notice that this honest reflection begins to anchor your identity in ways that discipline alone never could. When you correct your own weaknesses without waiting for someone else to point them out, you build a deeper sense of trust in yourself. You begin to rely on your own integrity, recognizing that your progress is no longer dependent on external validation or pressure. Every time you take responsibility for your actions, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of genuine, lasting change. Eventually, accountability becomes a natural part of your rhythm, woven into your thoughts and decisions. It guides you toward choices that align with your values and keeps you grounded when old habits try to pull you back. It helps you recognize when you are drifting and gently redirects you toward the path you committed to. Through it, you learn that strength is not just about endurance or discipline. It is also about honesty, and honesty that creates room for growth, correction, and renewal. And as this understanding settles deeply into your journey, you begin to realize that taking responsibility for your own transformation is not a burden, but a profound expression of inner strength. As you move further into the journey, the challenges you face begin to shift from external obstacles to the more subtle battles unfolding within your own mind. By now, discipline has taken root, daily habits are reshaping your identity, and accountability has taught you to stand honestly in front of your own reflection. Yet there remains another dimension of growth, one that does not announce itself loudly but is felt in the quiet, uncomfortable moments when you must confront your impulses, your distractions, and the emotional tides that rise and fall without warning. It is here, in these moments of discomfort, that mental fortitude begins to take shape. The process never feels dramatic. Instead, it arrives as a series of small internal choices that seem insignificant on their own. There are mornings when you wake with a fog of restlessness, evenings when your focus dissolves, and days when temptation whispers promises of ease. Temptation does not always appear as something harmful. Sometimes it shows up as a gentle suggestion to skip a commitment, to postpone a task, or to reach for comfort instead of discipline. At first, resisting these urges feels like a test of willpower, a tug-of-war between what you want now and what you want most. But as you choose restraint again and again, something deeper begins to shift. Each quiet refusal strengthens the part of you capable of guiding your desires rather than being guided by them. Embracing routine becomes another source of discomfort that gradually shapes your inner strength. Routine often feels repetitive, even dull, especially when the initial motivation begins to fade. Yet within that repetition lies the steady rhythm that anchors your mind. When you show up each day, not because emotion pulls you forward but because commitment does, you teach yourself to remain grounded regardless of how you feel. You stop waiting for inspiration and begin relying on consistency. Routine becomes a stabilizing force, helping you navigate the unpredictable currents of emotion without losing your direction. Emotional fluctuations continue to test you, sometimes without warning. A sudden wave of frustration, a burst of impatience, an unexpected discouragement each moment challenges your ability to remain centered. Instead of fighting these emotions or allowing them to dictate your actions, you learn to observe them with a calm curiosity. You understand that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent truths. When you maintain focus despite their presence, you create distance between what you feel and what you choose, allowing your actions to reflect intention rather than reaction. This skill becomes one of the most powerful elements of mental fortitude, enabling you to stay aligned with your purpose even during emotional storms. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, discomfort transforms from something you avoid into something you learn from. You begin to see that every moment of unease is an invitation to grow stronger, clearer, and more disciplined. Temptations reveal where your boundaries are still soft. Routine strengthens the structure of your daily life. Emotional turbulence teaches you how to stay steady without suppressing what you feel. Together, these experiences form the training ground for resilience. With time, you notice a profound shift. Challenges that once unsettled you now feel manageable. Tasks that once required immense effort become automatic. Emotional waves that once pulled you off course now pass through you without shaking your foundation. Mental fortitude settles into your identity, not as a shield that blocks discomfort, but as a compass that guides you through it. You begin to trust your own steadiness, knowing that discomfort no longer has the power to derail your progress. It has become the very force that makes you stronger. As Marcus stood in the quiet of the dojo on the 100th day, he felt a calm that had been entirely foreign to him just months ago. The alarms, the routines, the cold showers, the invisible sword cuts in hospital hallways, all of it had been preparation. A relentless forging of his spirit in fire and pressure. He realized that the true goal of this journey was never external success, never the stability of a business or the approval of others. It was the cultivation of something far more profound. An unshakable inner core, a spirit that remained steady regardless of circumstance. The storms of life, loss, failure, uncertainty would come, as they always do, but for the first time, Marcus understood he could face them with deliberate calm, a grounded presence, and purposeful action. The transformation was subtle yet undeniable. Where panic and doubt once ruled, he now felt the ability to pause, assess, and act without being consumed by emotion. Where fear once dictated choices, he could now respond with clarity, guided by an internal compass shaped by discipline and reflection. He realized that each challenge he had endured, each moment of discomfort he had faced deliberately, had not just tested him, it had strengthened him. And the beauty of this growth was that it did not rely on perfect conditions. It was not contingent on success, praise, or external validation. It was an inner resilience that existed independently, a steel forged from repeated confrontation with weakness, fear, and uncertainty. Marcus also understood that this was not a destination but a process. The will of steel, the Hagane no Ishi, was not something one achieved and then set aside. It was a daily choice, a living practice that required continual engagement. Life would always introduce new pressures, new tests of character. But now he possessed the knowledge and experience to navigate them without losing himself. Each act of deliberate discipline, each moment of self-awareness, each willingness to face discomfort and act rightly was another strike of the hammer. Another cycle of forging that removed impurities and strengthened the core. This realization brought with it a deep sense of freedom. Marcus was no longer enslaved by the need for approval, the fear of failure, or the illusion that identity was defined by outcomes. Instead, he had discovered a permanent foundation within himself, a steel-like certainty that allowed him to move through life with composure, courage, and clarity. He could engage fully with the world, take calculated risks, embrace uncertainty, and remain emotionally grounded, knowing that his spirit would not bend or break. To those watching, the lesson is clear. Transformation is not about shortcuts, comfort, or temporary motivation. It is about confronting what is difficult, embracing consistent practice, holding oneself accountable, and understanding that the trials you face are the very tools that forge resilience. The steel is within you. It is revealed through effort, reflection, and persistence. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this journey. If you found value in this story, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so you never miss content designed to inspire and strengthen your own spirit. Your support allows us to continue sharing these insights, and every like, comment, and subscription is deeply appreciated. Remember, true strength is cultivated daily, through conscious choice, patience, and relentless dedication. Forge your own will of steel, face life's challenges, and step into the world unshaken.